The rig was a black iron scar against a bruised sky the first time I saw it. The Icarus, they called it, a name that felt like a dare. The helicopter ride out was a thumping, nauseating blur. The North Sea a churning plate of lead-gray metal below. I clutched my transfer papers in my pocket, the ones I had felt like a pardon. A 6-month contract, hazard pay that could erase 2 years of my mother's medical debt in one shot. All I had to do was show up, turn a wrench, and keep my head down. A man named Shaw met me on the helipad, his handshake a calloused vice. He was the offshore installation manager, face weathered into a permanent squint. He didn't waste words. He showed me to my quarters, a metal box with a bunk, a small desk, and a porthole looking out into the gathering dusk. He gave me a map of the rig, a key card, and a radio set to channel 4. "Your lifeline," he said, tapping the radio. "Never off, never on any other channel. You hear static that isn't shipped ashore. You key the mic twice. Done to speak, just key it." I nodded, filing it away as standard comms protocol. Eccentric, maybe, but not alarming. He walked me through the mess hall, the rec room, the control room. It was all roaring machinery and the smell of diesel, salt, and stale coffee. Men moved with a tired, efficient gait. They nodded at Shaw, their eyes sliding over me with a kind of detached assessment. I was the new guy, the replacement for a hand named Erickson, who'd taken a personal leave. The story was vague, and no one offered details. The tour ended at a heavy, reinforced door marked A-Deck Supply Locker. Shaw produced a key, a real, physical key, not a card, and unlocked it. Inside, among the spare parts and tools, was a small, fireproof safe bolted to the floor. He worked the combination, swung the door open, and took out a single sheet of paper, laminated and worn at the edges. "This is your first and last reading," he said, his voice dropping. Though the machinery's roar was enough to cover us. "Memorize it. There is no copy. You will be tested on it, though you want to know when. Failure is not an option." He handed it to me. The heading was simple: Platform Icarus Operational Protocols. I read it. Then I read it again, my mind snagging on the words, trying to fit them into the logical framework of an industrial work site. They didn't fit. 1. All exterior work ceases at local sunset. All personnel must be inside the primary structure before the last sliver of sun disappears below the horizon. The time is not a guide. The event is the trigger. 2. The starboard side head, on B deck, is not to be used between the hours of 1:15 a.m. and 1:45 a.m. If you must go, use the portside facility. There are no exceptions for proximity. 3. The emergency strobe on the helipad is tested every night at 10:17 p.m. If you observe this test from a window, you will see a single white flash. If you see a double flash, red in tint, do not look again. Turn off all lights in your immediate area and sit in silence until you hear the Rig S primary generator cycle. This takes approximately 7 minutes. 4. During night shifts, you may hear footsteps circling the outer gantry on C deck. This is normal. If the footsteps stop directly outside a door or window, and you hear 3 distinct knocks, you are to ignore them. Do not approach. Do not acknowledge. The sound will move on. 5. The water from the desalination plant is safe. If you taste salt, metallic and thick, do not swallow. Spit it into a sealed container and dispose of it in the red biohazard bin in the med bay. Do not use that sink for 12 hours. 6. All interior doors marked with green square are to remain unlocked during night hours. All doors marked with a red circle must be locked from the inside after you pass through. The master key will not open a red circled door from the outside between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. 7. The radio may, on rare occasions, broadcast a voice that is not the dispatcheress. It will sound like a man, but it will use yesterday-esque call signs or weather codes. You are to turn your personal radio volume to 0 until the next scheduled check-in on the hour. Do not respond. 8. If you encounter a member of the crew you do not recognize, and they are wearing a blue jacket with a company logo that is inverted, the eagle facing left instead of right, you are not to greet them or make eye contact. Proceed to the nearest red circled door, lock it, and wait 15 minutes. 9. The supply logs must be tallied 3 times a day. At 7 a.m., 3 p.m., and 11 p.m. The count must be exact. Pay specific attention to the number of road flares in locker 4. There are 20. If you count 21, remove the extra flare using insulated gloves and drop it, unlit, into the sea from the starboard side. Do not let it touch your bare skin. 10. Should the interior lights flicker in a pattern of 2 short, 1 long, and 1 short, you are to immediately cease all conversation. This is not a power surge. Proceed to your assigned duties in silence for the next hour. 11. There is no black-colored, long-haired cat on the rig. If you see one, especially near the drilling floor, you are to report its location to the control room via text message only. Do not speak of it aloud. Then, return to your quarters and wash your hands with salt water for 2 full minutes. 12. The moon's reflection on the water, when viewed from the cafeteria windows, should be a single, clear shape. If you see multiple reflections, or a reflection that appears closer than the horizon, close the blinds on that window and do not open them again until sunrise. I looked up from the page, my mouth dry. What is this? Shaw's expression didn't change. It's the job, every word. Do you understand? I wanted to laugh. It read like a bad, creepy pasta, a list of paranoid delusions. But Shaw's eyes were flat, serious. The weight of the debt back home was heavier than any absurdity. I thought of Erickson, personal leave. I understand, I said. Good. He took the paper back, locked it in the safe, and led me out. Your shift starts at 10. Patel will show you the ropes. Remember the rules. They keep you alive. The first week was a study in controlled dissonance. By day, the rig was a monument to brute force engineering. I learned the rhythms of the drill string, the deafening roar of the machinery, the smell of grease and sea. The crew was a closed-off bunch, competent and quiet. Patel, my shift lead, was a man of few words and impeccable timing. He never mentioned the rules, but I saw him live them. At 10:17 p.m. on my first night, I was in the rec room. Patel stood and walked to the window, his back to it. He didn't look. A single white flash lit up the room for an instant. He sat back down. No one else reacted. On the third night, I was patrolling the sea deck gantry, checking pipe pressures. The wind was a constant, howling presence. Beneath it, I heard the footsteps. A steady, heavy tread on the metal grating outside, circling. Just like Rule 4. My skin prickled. I kept my eyes on my gauges. The footsteps completed one circuit, then another. On the third pass, they stopped directly outside the sealed hatch I was standing near. 3 knocks, sharp and clear, rang out on the reinforced glass. My breath caught. Every instinct screamed to look, to challenge, to see who was out there in the storm dark. But I remembered the words on the laminated sheet. Ignore them. Do not acknowledge. I stood frozen, my hand clenched around my flashlight. I didn't move. I didn't speak. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, the footsteps started again, moving away. I let out a shuddering breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I found Patel during our next break. "The footsteps," I said, my voice low. He sipped his coffee, his eyes on the wall clock. "You didn't answer?" "No." "Good." That was all he said. The following evening, I was logging the supply count. Locker 4. I unlocked it, shone my light inside, and started counting the road flares. They were neatly packed in their slots. 1, 2, 3, 18, 19, 20. I moved to close the door, then paused. Something felt off. I counted again, slower this time. 1, 2, 3, 19, 20. And a 21st, tucked behind the others, its casing a dull, waxy black instead of the standard vibrant orange. My blood went cold. Rule 9. If you count 21, I found the insulated gloves on their hook. My hands were trembling as I pulled them on. I reached in, my fingers closing around the extra flare. It was cold, unnaturally so. A deep chill that seeped through the thick gloves. I carried it carefully, holding it away from my body, down the corridors to the starboard rail. The sea below was a black churn. I dropped it over the side. It vanished into the darkness without a splash. When I returned to the supply locker, I counted again. 20 flares. I locked the door and leaned against the wall, my heart hammering. It was real. All of it was real. The next major test came during a storm. The rig groaned and shuddered under the assault of the waves. The power flickered, but never in the two short, one long, one short pattern. I was on radio duty in the control room, listening to the dispatcher's calm voice from the shore. Then another voice cut in, scratchy and distorted. "Icarus, this is supply vessel Poseidon S. Gift. Do you copy? ETA 1 hour. We have your priority shipment. Over." It sounded normal, almost. Then I caught it. The call sign, the Poseidon S. Gift, had been retired 2 years ago. ID read about its decommissioning in the company newsletter, and the voice used the previous day S authentication code. Rule 7. A voice that is not the dispatcher S. My hand went to the volume knob on my console. I turned it down to 0. The control room fell silent, except for the howl of the wind and the drumming of rain on the roof. Patel, who was monitoring another station, glanced over at me. He gave a single, curt nod. We worked in silence for 53 minutes, until the clock ticked over to the top of the hour. The dispatcher S voice came through, clear and correct, using the right codes. I turned my volume back up. I was learning. The rules were a cage, but they were the only thing standing between me and whatever we had drilled into, whatever lived in the cold dark below us, and the strange mist that sometimes surrounded us. My skepticism had been sandblasted away, replaced by a rigid, meticulous adherence to protocol. I became a creature of routine. I knew the exact number of steps from my quarters to the mess hall, 147. I could recite the supply list for my section from memory. I never, ever looked at the strobe light test. It was during my 3rd week that the amendments came. Shaw gathered the night shift in the mess hall. His face was graver than usual. "We've had an incident," he said, without preamble. He didn't specify what. The protocols have been updated. Listen carefully. He read from a new sheet of paper. Amendment 1. The prohibition for the starboard side head on B deck is now extended. It is not to be used between 12:45 a.m. and 2:15 a.m. The door is to be locked from the outside during this period. The key is held in the control room, Amendment 2. The footsteps on sea deck. If they stop and you hear a single knock followed by a voice that you recognize, you are to respond with the following phrase, and only this phrase. The shift change is complete. Do not use any other words. Do not acknowledge the voice by name. Amendment 3. The red circled doors. When locking them, you must now physically check the lock mechanism 3 times. Say secure after the 3rd check. Amendment 4. The water. If you taste salt, you are now to report to the med bay immediately after disposal for a vitals check. Do not delay. Amendment 5. The inventory. The flare count is now to be conducted every 4 hours. The number remains 20. Amendment 6. If you see the individual in the inverted logo jacket, do not proceed to a red circled door. Instead, go to the nearest green squared door and remain there for exactly 5 minutes. Then proceed directly to the control room and report. The new rules were tighter, more restrictive. They closed loopholes I had to known existed. The incident Shaw mentioned hung in the air, unspoken. I saw it in the eyes of the other men. A fresh tension. A new hire, a guy named Davies, had joined us the week before. He was young, cocky, and had laughed off the rules as hazing. I wondered if the incident involved him. The next night, the temptation came for me personally. I was doing my patrol on B deck, walking the long, poorly lit corridor that ran past the starboard head. It was 1:20 a.m., deep into the new forbidden window. The door was locked, a heavy padlock through the hasp. As I passed it, I heard a sound from within, a soft, wet, coughing sound. And then a voice, weak and strained. "Help me. I am stuck." The door S jammed. It was my Mother S voice. My feet rooted to the spot. It was her, down to the slight rasp she'd had since her pneumonia. It was impossible. She was 1,000 miles away in a hospital bed. But the sound was perfect. A recording played directly into my mind. "Please, son, it's so cold in here." Every fiber of my being wanted to respond, to smash the lock, to throw the door open. The dead, the reason I was here, was for her. To hear her voice, pleading, it was an exquisite torture. My hand reached for the padlock, and then I saw it. Under the door, a dark, viscous liquid was slowly seeping out, glistening in the low light. It was in water. It looked like old oil, or something worse. Rule 2. There are no exceptions for proximity. Amendment 1. It is not to be used between 12:45 a.m. and 2:15 a.m. I forced my hand away from the lock. I took a step back. "The shift change is complete," I whispered, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. The coughing stopped. The pleading stopped. The seeping liquid halted, then began to slowly retreat back under the door, as if being sucked away. The corridor was silent again, save for the hum of the rig. I walked away, my legs shaking. I didn't look back. I had passed, but I felt no triumph, only a deep, chilling horror. It knew me. It knew how to get to me. The siege began 2 nights later. It started with the lights. They flickered, then died completely. The emergency klaxons blared for a second before cutting out, leaving a silence that was more terrifying than any noise. The backup generators didn't kick in. We were plunged into a blackness so absolute it felt solid. The only light came from the lightning flashes outside the portholes, illuminating the chaotic sea for stark, frozen instants. Shawa's voice came over the radios, crackling with static but steady. "Emergency protocols. Now. Control room, light the candles. In the control room, battery-powered lanterns were forbidden during a blackout. Rule or protocol? I didn't know. But someone had lit a dozen thick, white emergency candles, their flames casting dancing, monstrous shadows on the walls. The entire crew was there, except for Davies. And the new guy, Henderson. Shaw stood in the center of the room, a piece of paper in his hands. Listen up. These are the emergency protocols. They are in effect until full power is restored, and I give the all clear. 1. No one leaves this room. The door is to remain locked and barricaded. We will take turns watching it. The watch is 2 people, always. You will count the seconds between lightning strikes. If the interval exceeds 1 minute, you wake me. 2. We will maintain absolute radio silence. The only exception is if you hear 3 long blasts from the rig's horn. That is the all clear from a source we can trust. Anything else is a mimic. 3. We have a limited supply of drinking water and salt. You will take a sip of water every hour. You will then take a grain of salt and place it on your tongue. Let it dissolve. This is not for hydration. This is a marker. 4. We will take inventory of ourselves every 30 minutes. By name and birth date. If someone gives a name you know but a birth date that is wrong, or if they hesitate for more than 3 seconds, you are not to look at them. You are to inform me quietly. 5. If the candles begin to burn blue, extinguish them immediately. We will proceed in darkness until the lightning returns. The night became a marathon of terror, measured in heartbeats and counted seconds. The storm raged outside, but inside the control room, the silence was heavier. We took our turns at the door, our ears straining. We heard things, scraping on the roof, a sound like something heavy being dragged through the corridors outside. Once, a voice, perfectly imitating Shaw, called from the other side of the door, demanding to be let in. "The barricade is secure," our Shaw said, his voice low and firm. The voice outside fell silent. The inventory was the worst. Every half hour, Patel would start. Patel. March 17th, 1978. Shaw. November. 2nd, 1965. My turn. Carter. September 9th, 1984. We went around the room. The first few cycles were fine. Then, on the 4th cycle, it was Henderson S.'s turn. He was a quiet man, an electrician. Henderson, July the 4th, 1981. There was a pause. The next man, O'Malley, didn't speak. Patel prompted him. "O'Malley." A voice, thick and slurred, came from O'Malley's corner. O'Malley. December. My blood ran cold. Rule 4 of the emergency protocol. Hesitate for more than 3 seconds. December. O'Malley said again, confusion evident. Shaw moved quickly. He didn't look at O'Malley. "Everyone, close your eyes. Now." I squeezed my eyes shut. I heard Shaw move across the room. I heard a soft, sighing sound, and then a thud as something hit the floor. "It is done," Shaw said, his voice tight. "Open your eyes. Do not look at the corner. Continue the inventory." We continued, our voices shaking. O'Malley was gone. What was left in the corner was not something to be looked at. We all understood that now. The price of a breach was absolute. The siege lasted for 9 hours. The candles never burned blue, but twice they flickered violently for no reason. We sipped our water, dissolved our salt, and counted the seconds between lightning strikes. The longest interval was 57 seconds. I spent my watch shifts with my back to the door, counting in my head, my whole body tense, waiting for the 3 knocks, or a single knock, or my mother-s voice. They never came. The protocols were holding. Dawn came, a slow gray leaching of the darkness. The storm began to abate. As the first weak light filtered through the portholes, the Riggis lights flickered once, then came on with a steady hum. The generators had finally been restored. Shaw unlocked the door and removed the barricade. The corridor outside was empty. It was over. The audit was grim. O'Malley was gone. So was Davies. We found his personal log in his quarters. The last entry was a scrawled, frantic note. Heard a kid crying near the drill floor. Went to look. Big mistake. It's not a kid. It's using a kid's voice. It's C. The writing ended in a long, jagged line. We also found Henderson. He was in the port side head, alive but catatonic, sitting on the floor and staring at the wall, his mouth moving silently. He had followed the rules. He had survived. But whatever he had seen or heard had scraped his mind clean. The company sent a relief crew a week later. My contract was up. I stood on the helipad, the wind tugging at my clothes, feeling 1,000 years old. I had the debt money. It felt like blood money. Shaw found me before I boarded. He looked exhausted. "You did good, Carter," he said. He pressed a key into my hand. The key to the supply locker safe. The next guy. He'll need this. Make a new copy. The combination is the same. I looked at the key, then back at his weary, resigned face. I was the veteran now, the rule giver. The baton was being passed. "I will," I said. He nodded, and that was that. I'm onshore now. The world is too bright, too loud. I startle at sudden noises. I count my steps without thinking. I still wake up at 2:14 a.m., my heart pounding, and listen for footsteps that aren't there. I bought a laminating machine. I am typing up the rules, all of them, the core protocols, the amendments, the emergency procedures. The list is longer than I remember. I am adding one of my own at the bottom. A final piece of advice for the next soul who signs that contract for the Icarus. I look at the key on my desk. It's just a piece of metal, but it feels like the weight of a life. I'll mail the package tomorrow. The address is for a man named Finney. I wonder if he has debts to pay. I wonder if he's a skeptic. I hope, for his sake, that he's a fast learner. Please write second part, in continuity. The key felt like a shard of ice in my palm, even in the stifling heat of my onshore apartment. I placed it on the cheap laminate of my desk, next to the stack of crisp $100 bills that were supposed to represent my freedom. They just looked like paper now. Monopoly money stained with something I couldn't wash off. The first week back was a sensory assault. The constant hum of city traffic was a chaotic, meaningless roar compared to the rhythmic, knowable groans of the rig. Fluorescent lights in grocery stores were too steady, too trusting. I found myself flinching when they didn't flicker at 10:17 p.m. I kept a small container of sea salt in my kitchen cupboard and would sometimes, without thinking, put a single grain on my tongue. The sharp, clean taste, a grounding ritual in a world that felt increasingly unmoored. Sleep was a foreign country I could no longer visit. I'd lie in the dark, my body tuned to a frequency of dread, waiting for a knock that never came, for a voice that wasn't there. I started sleeping with the lights on, a wasteful, cowardly act that did nothing to quiet the pounding in my chest. The debt was gone. My mother was in a better facility, but the cost was a permanent fracture in my understanding of reality. I had traded one prison for another, and the new one had no walls I could see. I bought the laminating machine from a dusty office supply store. The clerk was an old man who hummed as he worked. The sound was too normal. I wanted to tell him to stop, that a consistent melodic hum could be a lure, a camouflage. I said nothing. At home, I opened a blank document. The cursor blinked, an impatient metronome. I began to type, Platform Icarus Operational Protocols. My fingers remembered the words before my mind did. They flowed onto the screen, each one a cold, hard fact of my new existence. 1. All exterior work ceases at local sunset. I typed through the original 12, my knuckles white. Then I added the amendments, the tightened restrictions that had followed the unmentioned incident. I added the emergency protocols, the siege rules that had saved us, or what was left of us. The document grew. It was no longer a single sheet. It was 3 pages long, a testament to everything we had learned the hard way. I paused at the end. My own addition. It felt necessary. Final note, the rules are not suggestions. They are the structure of the world on the Icarus. The thing below does not think like you. It learns, it adapts. Your only safety lies in perfect, unthinking compliance. Do not try to understand it. Just survive it. I printed the pages. The laminating machine whirred, sealing the words in plastic, making them permanent, official. I assembled the package, the 3 laminated sheets. The physical key. I addressed it to a Mr. Eris Finney, care of the company S. Onshore Logistics Office. The return address was a P.O. box ID rented, under a vague sense of paranoia that now felt like the most rational precaution. The next morning, I stood in line at the post office. The woman behind the counter had a kind, bored face. She took the padded envelope, weighed it, and slapped on the postage. Anything fragile, liquid, or hazardous? She asked, the question a rote recitation. I almost laughed. No, I said, my voice rough from disuse. Just instructions. The package was gone. The baton had been passed. A wave of relief, so profound it felt like a physical unclenching, washed over me. It was his problem now, Eris Finney's problem. The relief lasted for 3 days. On the 4th night, I was washing a dinner plate when the tap water hit my lips. It tasted of salt. Thick, metallic, oceanic salt. I spat it into the sink, my heart seizing. Rule 5, spit it into a sealed container. I fumbled for an empty jam jar, my hands shaking, and spat again and again, the coppery taste clinging to my tongue. I screwed the lid on tight. I had no red biohazard bin. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, holding the jar of contaminated water, feeling like a fool. I was on shore. It was impossible. But the taste was real. The protocols were for the rig. They weren't for here. This was a coincidence, a pipe issue. It had to be. I poured the jar's contents down the drain and ran the disposal for a full minute, the grinding roar drowning out my thoughts. I didn't report to a med bay. I just stood there in the silence of my safe, normal apartment and felt the first true thread of fear since I'd left the Icarus. It wasn't a memory. It was a presence. The following evening, I was taking out the trash. The hallway light in my apartment building flickered. It was an old building. The wiring was bad. It flickered once, twice, went dark for a second, then flickered once more. 2 short, 1 long, 1 short. I froze, the bag of trash heavy in my hand. Rule 10, cease all conversation. I was alone. The silence I fell into was absolute and terrified. The light stabilized, burning with a steady yellow glow. I finished taking out the trash, my movements robotic. It was a fluke, a random power surge. The human mind seeks patterns. I was seeing patterns where none existed. I was traumatized. That is what a therapist would say. I was considering finding a therapist. A week later, I saw the cat. I was walking back from the corner store, a bag of groceries in my arm. I cut through the small, neglected park a block from my building. In the dim glow of a distant street lamp, I saw it sitting on a bench. A black-colored, long-haired cat. It was licking one paw, perfectly ordinary. Then it turned its head and looked directly at me. Its eyes didn't reflect the light. They seemed to absorb it. Two pools of perfect blackness. Rule 11. There's no black-colored, long-haired cat on the rig. If you would, C1 report its location via text message only. Do not speak of it aloud. My phone was in my pocket. Who would I text? Shaw? The company? They'd think I'd lost my mind. I stood, paralyzed, the cat staring at me with its light-eating eyes. Then it stood, stretched with an unnatural, boneless grace, and jumped down from the bench. It didn't run. It walked with a slow, deliberate gait towards the storm drain at the edge of the park. It paused at the grate, looked back at me once more, and then slipped between the bars, vanishing into the darkness below. I didn't go home and wash my hands with salt water. I ran. I dropped my groceries on the sidewalk and ran the rest of the way to my apartment, fumbling with my keys, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I slammed the door shut and locked it, then checked the lock 3 times. Secure, I whispered, the word a ghost on my lips. I was not safe. I had never been safe. I had carried it back with me. A seed, a taint. The rules were not just for the rig. They were a containment field for something that could leak, could seep into the world. And I was a crack in the dam. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of high alert. I inventoried my canned goods. I counted my batteries. I drew the blinds and didn't open them. I listened. I waited. The knock came on the 3rd night. It was not on my door. It was on the living room window, 2 floors up. 3 distinct, sharp raps, like knuckles on glass. I didn't move from my bed. I remembered the footsteps on the gantry. If the footsteps stop and you hear 3 distinct knocks, you are to ignore them. I ignored them. A minute passed, then a single knock, and a voice filtered through the double-paned glass, faint but unmistakable. Carter? It's Henderson. Let me in. I got out. Henderson, the electrician who had been found catatonic. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a lie, a mimic. Henderson was still in a company facility, or worse. This was a personalized lure. It knew my crew. It knew my weakness, the desire for a fellow survivor, for someone who understood. I knew the amended rule. If you hear a single knock followed by a voice that you recognize, I swallowed, my throat dry as dust. I spoke to the dark ceiling, my voice a strained croak. The shift change is complete. Silence. Then a sound that made my blood freeze. It wasn't a voice. It was a low, wet, clicking sound, like stones being knocked together deep underwater. It lasted for maybe 5 seconds, and then it was gone. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the headboard, a kitchen knife in my lap, until the gray dawn light bled around the edges of the blinds. When the sun was fully up, I went to the window. There was nothing on the ledge outside, no mark on the glass, but I knew. The barrier was thinner than I had thought. The geography of the Icarus was not a fixed point in the North Sea. It was a condition, a state of being, and I was still in it. The final confirmation came in the mail. A plain manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of a personnel transfer form. The name at the top was Eris Finney. His 6-month contract on the Icarus was set to begin in 2 weeks. Stamped across the form in bold, red letters was a single word: declined. He wasn't coming. He'd gotten my package, read the rules, and backed out. The rig was unmanned. Someone had to be there. Someone had to follow the procedures, to conduct the inventories, to ignore the knocks. The thought of the Icarus sitting empty in the North Sea, its protocols unattended, its thresholds unguarded, was more terrifying than any mimic-esque voice. An open door. An invitation. I looked at the key on my desk. I looked at the stack of money, already diminished by my mother's new care plan. I thought of the salt taste in the water, the flickering lights, the cat, the thing at my window. It wasn't about debt anymore. It wasn't about money. It was about containment. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I had sworn I would never call again. The line clicked, connected. Shaw, the familiar, weary voice, answered. "It's Carter," I said. There was a long pause. I could hear the faint, familiar roar of the rig in the background. He was still out there. He'd never left. "I know," he said finally. "I was wondering when you'd call." Finney declined. "I know that too." "I am coming back," I said. The words felt inevitable, like the final turn of a combination lock. Another pause, longer this time. "It is different now, Carter. Since the blackout, it's bolder. The amendments list has grown. We're up to 23 core rules. It didn't surprise me. It adapted." "I have my own to add," I said. I heard what might have been a grim, tired chuckle. Or it might have been static. "Figured you might. The helicopter leaves at 0900 Thursday. Don TB late." The line went dead. I put the phone down. The fear was still there, a cold stone in my gut. But it was now joined by a grim, terrible purpose. I was not returning for a paycheck. I was returning to my post. The rules were my world now, and the world was breaking. Someone had to hold the line. I started packing. I included salt. I included a watch with a second hand. I included the laminated sheets, my own amendments already forming in my mind. The key was back in my pocket, its weight a familiar and dreadful comfort. I was going home. "Can you please close this story now?" The helicopter ride back was a study in gray sky, gray sea. A sense of returning to a monochrome reality after the false color of the world on shore. The Icarus appeared through the scudding clouds, a stark iron geometry against the endless water. It didn't look like a place where men worked. It looked like a bulwark, a fortress under perpetual siege. Shaw met me on the helipad. He looked older, the lines on his face etched deeper. He didn't offer a handshake. He just nodded, a look of grim recognition passing between us. There were no greetings, no welcome backs. The formalities had been stripped away. "We re on Amendment 9, he said, turning and leading me inside. The roar of the machinery was a familiar, almost comforting dirge. The starboard head on B deck is permanently sealed. Welders did it last week. The voice, it got more persuasive. I just nodded. I understood. He showed me to the same quarters, the same bunk, the same porthole. Nothing had changed, and everything had. The atmosphere was thicker, the silence of the crew more profound. They were down to a skeleton crew, men with hollow eyes and automatic movements. They saw me, and there was no assessment, only a flicker of pity, quickly masked. Shaw handed me a new laminated sheet. It was warm from his pocket. Memorize it. The new rules are in red. I looked at it. The original 12 were there, black text. Then Amendments 1 through 8 in blue. Amendments 9 through 23 were in a stark, warning red. Amendment 14. The inventory of road flares is now hourly. The count remains 20. If you count 19, Lock the locker and do not open it for 12 hours. Do not attempt to find the missing flare. Amendment 17. The voice on the radio may now use today and AU codes. It is the tone that is wrong. If the dispatcher, ESSA voice, lacks the background hum of the shoreside generator, it is a mimic. Enact radio silence. Amendment 21. The Moon S reflection is no longer a reliable metric. Trust only the tactile. If the rig S railing feels warmer than the air temperature, go inside immediately. Do not look at the water. The rules were no longer just about avoidance. They were about active deception, about outthinking something that learned from every interaction. The cage had gotten smaller, the bars closer together. My first shift back was a patrol of the lower decks. I moved with a robotic precision, checking the red circled doors, my lips moving silently as I verified the locks 3 times. Secure, secure, secure. I passed the welded shut door of the B-deck head. From behind the sealed metal, I heard a faint, rhythmic scratching. I did not pause. I did not alter my pace. I had expected it. The next few days were a brutal reacclimation. I fell back to the rhythms, the constant, low-grade terror, becoming a background hum, like the generators. I conducted the hourly flare count, 20, always 20. I ignored the footsteps. I turned my radio down when the dispatcher S voice sounded a little too clear, a little too devoid of the familiar static. It was on the 5th night that the real test came. I was on the night watch in the control room with a man named Griggs, one of the old hands. The storm that had been brewing on the horizon finally hit, but it was a strange, quiet storm. No thunder, no lightning, just a thick, impenetrable fog that swallowed the world, and a soft, insistent rain that sounded like whispering. The main power went out. The emergency lights flickered on, casting a sickly yellow glow. "Here we go," Griggs said, his voice flat. He lit the candles. The flames stood perfectly straight, untouched by any draft. We didn't wait for Shaw. We enacted the emergency protocols from memory. We locked and barricaded the door. We began the inventory of ourselves. Name, birth date. My turn came and went. Griggsy West's turn came and went. Then from the corridor outside, we heard it. Not a knock, not a voice. Music. A tinny, distant rendition of Happy Birthday. It was the song, but played on something discordant, like broken glass and wet string. Griggs stiffened, his face, in the candlelight, went pale. That's the tune my daughter's music box plays," he whispered, his professional calm cracking. "She plays it every night." It was a lure, perfectly tailored, the most vicious one yet. It wasn't threatening. It was nostalgic. It was love, weaponized. Griggs took a step towards the door. "Griggs," I said, my voice sharp. Radio silence. No one leaves. "But she sits her song," he said, his eyes wide and unseeing, focused on the barricaded door. "It is not her," I said, the words cold and hard. I was following a new rule, one I had written for myself on the flight over. Trust nothing that appeals to sentiment. It is the sharpest hook. The music stopped. In its place was a small, clear, girl-less voice. "Daddy, the door is stuck. I am scared." Griggs let out a choked sound and lunged for the barricade. I was faster. I didn't try to reason with him. I didn't try to hold him back. I simply picked up the fire extinguisher from its bracket and, with a single, precise motion, struck him on the back of the head. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The rules did not account for a breach by your own partner, but the spirit of the rules did. Contain the threat, maintain the integrity of the room. The little girl's voice outside the door gave a soft, disappointed sigh. Then it was gone. I dragged Griggs to a corner, checked his pulse strong, and resumed my post at the door. I counted the seconds in my head. I did not look at him. I did not feel guilt. I felt nothing but the cold, clear satisfaction of a procedure correctly followed. When Shaw and the others relieved us at dawn, the fog had lifted. Griggs came to, groggy and ashamed. Shaw looked from him to me, saw the fire extinguisher back in its bracket, and understood. He gave me a single, slow nod. No words were needed. I was no longer the new guy. I was one of them, fully. Weeks bled into months. The rules continued to evolve. We added my first amendment. A breach of resolve by a crew member is to be treated as a breach of physical security. Neutralize the intent, not the person. I became the rule giver for the new hands, the ones who arrived with skepticism in their eyes that was quickly extinguished. I showed them the laminated sheets. I spoke in a calm, monotone voice, just as Shaw had. I saw my own former confusion reflected in their faces, and I felt nothing. My empathy had been cauterized, a necessary amputation for survival. My contract ended again. This time, there was no relief crew. Just a promise of one, eventually. Shaw pressed a new key into my hand. "The safe combination has changed," he said. "You know the number." I did. It was the date of the blackout siege. I didn't go back to my apartment. I rented a room in a cheap harbor-side hotel, a place with thin walls and the constant smell of fish and diesel. The world outside was still too bright, too loud, but the frantic edge of my fear was gone. It had been replaced by a perpetual, low-level vigilance, a waiting. I sat at the small desk and unfolded the latest rules. I began to type a clean copy. I incorporated all the amendments, streamlining the language, removing the color coding. It was a single, seamless document of survival. A holy text for a god of darkness. A week later, a notification came. A new hire had been found. A woman this time. An engineer named Flores. Her contract was confirmed. I prepared the package, the newly laminated rules, the new key. I didn't need to include a note of warning. The rules were the warning. I took the package to the post office. The same bored woman was behind the counter. She didn't recognize me. "Anything fragile, liquid, or hazardous?" she asked. I looked at the envelope, containing a set of instructions for living in a world that was actively, intelligently hostile. A guide to perpetual fear. "No," I said, "just the facts." I handed it over. The baton was passed. My watch was over. For now. I walked back to my hotel room. The sky was beginning to bruise with evening. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. I checked the lock 3 times. "Secure," I whispered to the empty room. I went to the window and looked out at the sea, a flat gray expanse in the distance. Somewhere out there, the Icarus was holding its line. And I was here, in another kind of cage, waiting for the rules to change again, knowing in my bones that they would. The key on my desk gleamed in the fading light, a promise and a threat. It was over, but it was never really over. It was just someone else, Et's turn to learn. The key sits on the desk by the window. The sea is calm today, a flat sheet of gray under a flat sheet of gray sky. There is no wind. The silence in this room is a different kind than the silence on the rig. It is emptier. I keep the radio on, tuned to a local station, just for the hum of a human voice I don't have to answer to. My bag is packed by the door. It holds a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and the salt. Always the salt. The rest of my possessions are in a storage locker, paid for a year in advance. A pointless gesture, perhaps, but it feels like order. It feels like a rule. I think of Flores. She will be receiving the package soon. She will read the words, feel the weight of the key. She will have her reasons for coming, her own debts to pay. I hope she is a practical person. I hope she is not prone to sentiment. The sun will be gone soon. I will lock the door. I will check it 3 times. I will sit in the chair and wait for the night to pass. There are no footsteps here, no knocks on the glass. Not yet. But the waiting is part of the ritual now. The watch does not end because you have left the field. It only changes its shape. Tomorrow, I will walk to the post office. I will buy a single stamp. I will mail the key to a woman I have never met, and with it, the weight of a world she cannot possibly imagine. It is the only thing left to do. The final protocol, the last rule.